They stole my home, my blood, and my name, but they didn't know I was coming to their wedding with handcuffs. You know that dream where you walk into a room full of people, and they all turn to stare because you're the uninvited guest who knows the truth? I lived that dream. Only it wasn't a room. It was a wedding. And I wasn't just crashing it, I was shutting it down. With police. With proof. With fire in my chest. My name is Corinne Weller. I'm 58 years old, a librarian by trade, and until recently, I thought betrayal was just a plot twist reserved for novels. But I was wrong. Because betrayal came to me in silk and champagne, wearing my sister's smile and my ex-husband's ring. Let me back up. A year ago, my 22-year marriage ended quietly. No screaming. No lawyers lunging over tables. Just silence. Gary, my ex, said he'd fallen out of love. Said I was stuck in the past. That I made our home feel like a museum. I didn't fight him. I signed the divorce papers and gave him the freedom he craved. What I didn't know was that freedom came with a price tag. My house. Now, the house wasn't just a building. It was my sanctuary. I had inherited it from our grandmother. My name was on the deed, solely. Or so I thought. 2 months after the divorce, I started getting letters from banks, congratulations from realtors, even a pamphlet from a moving company. But I hadn't listed the house. I hadn't sold a thing. My stomach twisted. I called the county clerk. And that's when I saw it, my signature. On the sale agreement. And it wasn't just copied. It was perfectly forged. My hands shook. But my voice didn't. I filed a fraud complaint immediately. Quietly. No calls to family. No Facebook rants. I played it calm because I knew something bigger was coming. And I was right. A few weeks later, an old friend sent me an online wedding invitation. My ex-husband, Gary Weller, was marrying, wait for it, my sister, Diana. The woman who once cried at my wedding. The woman who held my hand after the divorce and whispered, "He didn't deserve you." Yeah. That woman. They were having the ceremony in the same botanical garden where Gary had proposed to me 25 years ago. The audacity made my teeth ache. But instead of losing it, I sharpened my edges. I gathered bank statements. Transaction records. I hired a handwriting analyst. And the piece de resistance? A recording of Diana admitting to a notary that she'd signed for Corinne because she would have said yes anyway. So I showed up to the wedding. Not in white. Not in tears. But in navy blue. Calm. With 2 detectives beside me. The guests were already seated. The officiant was clearing his throat. And just as Gary said I do, the officers stepped forward. The moment the cuffs clicked, Diana screamed, "This is a mistake." And I smiled. Because it wasn't. They were arrested on site for fraud, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. The wedding made headlines, bride and groom arrested at the altar in real estate scam. As for the house? It's mine. The deed's been corrected. And the locks? Changed. So if you ever think silence is weakness, remember this: sometimes the quiet ones show up with police reports. And sometimes, the best revenge wears a smirk and holds a keychain. If you were in my shoes, would you have crashed the wedding or waited for the honeymoon? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel for more stories like this. And tell me, where in the world are you watching from? You'd think walking out of a wedding with your house back and your enemies in handcuffs would feel like a victory parade. But what no one talks about is the silence afterward. The kind that rings louder than applause. That's what I came home to. No congratulations. No balloons. Just the click of my heels on the hardwood floor, the same hardwood my grandmother used to mop in silence when she was angry. I guess it runs in the blood. But it didn't take long for the phone to start buzzing. Not with support. Oh no. With judgment. First it was my cousin Nancy. "Corinne, did you really have to do it that way? On her wedding day?" Then my brother left a voicemail. "You're blowing this whole thing out of proportion. Diana made a mistake, she still loves you." She loves me? Let me tell you something, real love doesn't sneak behind your back, sleep with your ex-husband, forge your name on a property deed, and try to evict you from the only home you've ever known. That's not love. That's narcissism dressed up in lipstick and lace. But the worst call? Came from my mother. "Corinne," she said, with that tired sigh that always made me feel like I was the problem, "you've embarrassed the whole family. Couldn't you have handled this privately?" Privately? They tried to erase my name like I was some signature on scrap paper. But I was the embarrassment. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "Mom, I handled it exactly the way they handled me, without warning. Without permission. And definitely without your blessing." Then I hung up. 3 days later, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single sentence, written in my sister's handwriting: "You just couldn't let me have one thing." One thing? I gave her my hand-me-downs. My time. My trust. Even my old prom dress when hers ripped an hour before the dance. She's always been the younger, prettier one. The favorite. And she still thought I was in her way. But something in that note twisted my spine straight. That's when I knew it wasn't about Gary. It was about control. About power. And she thought I'd roll over like I always did. So I did what she never expected. I went public. I gave an exclusive interview to the local paper. I showed them everything: the forged signature, the sale contract, the notary recording. The journalist was young, fresh-faced, and wide-eyed as she asked, "Why did you wait until the wedding?" I looked right at her and said, "Because I wanted them to know what it feels like to have everything taken from you in front of everyone who claimed to love you." The article went viral. Comments flooded in. Some called me savage. Others called me brave. One woman wrote, "You just became my hero. I'm forwarding this to my sister-in-law." That one made me laugh harder than I had in weeks. And you know what? It felt good to be heard. To not be silenced. To not apologize for demanding justice with style. Because the truth is, they didn't just try to steal my house. They tried to steal me. And I'm just getting started. After the article went viral, something strange happened. Strangers started believing in me more than my own family ever had. Women I didn't know messaged me with stories of betrayal, of siblings turning lovers, of forged documents and stolen inheritances. I wasn't alone. And that made me feel dangerous, in the best way. But being dangerous also means you start asking better questions. One of those questions was simple: if Gary and Diana forged my name once, how many times had they done it before? I dug through my old files, the ones we kept in that brown metal cabinet in the back room nobody ever touched. Tax records. Insurance. Bank statements. I even pulled out my old checkbooks. My hands trembled as I compared signatures. Some looked right. Others, too right. Perfectly right. Too perfect. So I called my bank. The woman on the phone, sweet southern drawl, tried to brush me off. "Oh, Mrs. Weller, sorry, Ms. Weller, you added your ex-husband as a co-signer in 2021. He had full access." "No, ma'am," I said, cold. "I never added him. I want every record. Every withdrawal. Every digital signature since then." 3 days later, I got a thick manila envelope in the mail. And the moment I opened it, my breath stopped. They hadn't just forged the house sale. They had been slowly draining my personal savings for over a year. Not all at once. Small withdrawals. Just under the reporting limit. $1,900 here. $2,500 there. Vacations. Spa charges. Jewelry purchases in her name. I didn't even know they'd opened a joint account in Mexico, using my forged signature as identity verification. That's when my blood turned ice. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated financial murder. And the best part? I now had enough evidence to charge them not just with forgery, but felony-level financial fraud across state lines. I took it straight to the district attorney's office. The investigator assigned to me, a woman named Dana who wore her hair like a soldier and spoke like she didn't have time for nonsense, looked at the folder and said, "Ms. Weller, you realize they could do jail time for this?" I looked her in the eyes and said, "That's the point." But here's where the twist really sank its teeth in. When Dana pulled their credit records, she noticed something else. A large deposit, $50,000, had been made into Diana's account 3 weeks before the wedding. Not from Gary. From an LLC. Guess whose name was listed as the silent partner of that LLC? My mother's. Yep. My own mother helped fund the wedding. With my stolen money. And when I traced it back, I found the LLC was originally set up to purchase my grandmother's lake cabin, the one I refused to sell after she passed. The one my mother always wanted to remodel for the family. They were all in on it. So now, the case wasn't just about my ex-husband and my sister. It was about the woman who gave birth to me, and then handed my future to the people who tried to erase me. Let me tell you, betrayal from a spouse hurts. Betrayal from a sibling cuts deep. But betrayal from your mother? That scars your bones. So I took a deep breath. I gathered every receipt. Every screenshot. Every voicemail. And I walked back into that courthouse. And I didn't just file charges. I filed war. You know what they say about storms? That silence before it hits is the scariest part. But for me, the scariest part wasn't the quiet. It was the applause I still heard in my head from their wedding guests. The cheers. The laughter. The clinking of champagne glasses, completely unaware that the happy couple was standing on a throne of fraud. And my mother? She was front row. Smiling. Wearing that lavender silk dress I once bought her for my retirement dinner. I wanted to scream, but instead, I planned. The media had already swarmed after the wedding arrest. So I did something that would make Diana's mascara streak and Gary's ego crumble. I invited the local news anchor, yes, the one who had covered their wedding day arrest, to my house. I offered her tea. And then I handed her a flash drive. "What's this?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "Bank statements. Wire transfers. LLC papers. Forged documents. And audio of my mother telling a notary, 'Corinne will never fight back, she never does.'" The anchor's eyebrows nearly hit her hairline. "Are you sure you want to go public again?" I didn't blink. They wanted to bury me. Let's see how they handle being buried in the truth. That night, the news segment aired. It wasn't just a story. It was a timeline of betrayal, carefully narrated, with overlays of my sister in her wedding gown and my mother's signature on company paperwork. The final shot? A voice clip of my sister laughing over dinner. "Corinne's so passive, she'll probably bake us a wedding cake when she finds out." The next day, I wasn't the one walking through town with eyes following me. They were. The backlash was instant. My mother got booted from her church volunteer board. Diana's job at the private school? Suspended pending ethical investigation. And Gary? Well, the golf club he used to brag about? Revoked his membership. Apparently, they don't like felons on the 18th hole. But the real twist came when I was walking through the farmer's market that weekend. A stranger stopped me. Late 40s, kind face, holding a bag of lemons. She said, "You're Corinne, right? From the news?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "You don't know me, but I just want you to know, you're not crazy. You're not bitter. You're a warrior." I went home and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in months, I felt seen. And yet, something still gnawed at me. Because as I was looking through Diana's bank transactions, I noticed one more detail. A weekly $400 cash withdrawal to a person labeled K.C. It wasn't a store. It wasn't rent. It was recurring. Quiet. Intentional. And my gut that had failed me before, suddenly screamed, they weren't just stealing from me. They were paying someone to keep a secret. And if I was right, then this whole thing wasn't just about money or property. It was about something far darker. So I did what any wronged woman with nothing left to lose would do. I called a private investigator. The thing about betrayal is, once you feel it, you never forget the scent. It clings. Like mildew in old curtains. Like smoke in your hair after a fire you didn't start. That's what it felt like scrolling through Diana's bank records and seeing that same transaction, week after week, $400. To someone labeled K.C. No last name. No memo. Just 2 letters and silence. Now, I don't know about you, but when something repeats that precisely, it's not charity, it's a cover-up. So I hired her. Vera Choi. Retired from the sheriff's department, now a private investigator with a voice like gravel and eyes that could flay your soul. I gave her everything. Flash drives. Statements. My suspicions. She didn't blink once. She said, "Give me 4 days." She called me in 3. "Corinne," she said, "I found K.C. And you might want to sit down." I was already sitting. Didn't help. K.C. was Kendra Collins. Age 38. Former dental receptionist. No criminal record. But once upon a time? She filed a sexual harassment complaint against Gary Weller, my ex-husband. The complaint never made it to court. She was paid off quietly. $10,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. The firm buried it. Gary called it a misunderstanding. But Vera kept digging. Turns out, Kendra didn't just fade into the background. She moved. Changed jobs. And for the last year? She'd been paid in cash through Diana's account. $400 a week. For what? I asked. Vera just slid me a folder. Inside were blurry parking garage photos, Gary handing off envelopes to Kendra. Once a week. Always in the same lot. Always with his face covered. And then came the kicker. One photo, taken just 5 weeks before the wedding, showed Kendra walking into a medical office. Pregnancy clinic. My heart didn't just drop. It cracked. You want the truth? I almost didn't believe it. My hands shook. My ears rang. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about stolen money or property. This was about a child. Maybe his child. Maybe theirs. And Diana knew. She was paying Kendra off to disappear. To stay quiet. So Gary could marry her cleanly. So their scandal wouldn't stain their perfect lie. That's why they needed money so badly. That's why they forged my signature. Sold the house. Raided my account. They were funding silence. But I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I met Kendra. Yep. I tracked her down myself. Brought Vera along, of course. We met in a diner off I-85. She was nervous. Kept her hood up. Her eyes darted toward the door every 5 seconds like Gary might burst in with lawyers and lies. Kendra, I said, I don't want to hurt you. I just want the truth. Whatever they made you sign, whatever they paid you, I'm not here to destroy your life. I just want mine back. She stared at me for a long time. Then whispered, he said you were cold. Controlling. That you'd ruin everything if you found out. I laughed, quiet and bitter. No, honey. I'm not the one who ruined everything. And just like that, she slid a thumb drive across the table. I recorded everything. Just in case. In case he turned on me too. What was on that drive? Proof of hush money. Threats. And a confession, Gary admitting to forging my name because, quote, she never reads the fine print anyway. I didn't need a court anymore. I needed a microphone. And they were about to hear my voice. Courtrooms are colder than they look on television. And quieter. There's no dramatic music, no zoom in on gasps. Just squeaky shoes, whispered objections, and the subtle hum of fluorescent lights that make you feel like your skin is under interrogation. I had my folder in my lap. My fingers resting on the flash drive Kendra gave me. My mouth rehearsing words I didn't want to say again, but knew I had to. Gary sat across from me at the defendant's table. He looked thinner. Grayer. Still smug. Diana? She couldn't meet my eyes. Her posture screamed shame, but her lipstick said war. I wasn't fooled. I never would be again. And then, they called my mother. I didn't know she was on the witness list. When she walked to the stand, something inside me clenched so hard it almost cracked a rib. She wore her pearls. The same ones I bought her for her 60th birthday. Her hair done just so. Not a wrinkle out of place. State your name for the record, the bailiff said. Margaret Lynn Weller, she replied. Still using my father's last name like it was a medal. The prosecutor started gently. Mrs. Weller, did you have any involvement in the sale of your daughter's home? Her fingers tightened on the edge of the witness box. I advised Diana, yes. I believed Corinne no longer needed such a large house. She was alone. It made sense for the family to reallocate assets. Reallocate assets? I nearly stood up. And did Corinne give permission for this sale? She didn't exactly say no. That's when my heart dropped. She didn't say no? Is that all I was to her? A signature she could interpret? The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Weller, are you aware that Corinne's signature was forged? Mom blinked. Once. Twice. Then said, I don't believe that's true. Corinne is emotional. Always has been. I wouldn't put it past her to forget she signed something, then panic and blame others. There it was. The knife. And she didn't even look at me when she twisted it. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't flinch. I just turned toward the jury, and I saw it, disgust. Sympathy. Some leaned back like they couldn't believe what they were hearing. But the defense attorney? He smiled. Like my mother had just handed him a golden gavel. They were setting up a narrative, that I was unstable. That I was confused. That I didn't remember signing things. But they didn't know what was coming. Because as soon as my mother stepped down, the prosecutor introduced new evidence. Kendra's recording. The audio filled the room. Gary's voice, unmistakable, she never reads the fine print. Just scribble her name. Worst case, she'll yell a little and get over it. Then Diana, will keep paying Kendra. No one will know. And my mother will testify, she always protects me. Silence. Pin drop silence. My mother's face turned to stone. Gary turned pale. Diana's lips parted in horror like she finally realized the ship was going down, and they were chained to the anchor. The judge adjusted his glasses. We'll reconvene tomorrow with rebuttals, he said. Court is adjourned. As people stood to leave, I didn't. I looked at my mother. dead in the eyes. She looked back for the first time since the trial began. And whispered, barely audible, "You were supposed to be the boring one. The quiet one. I never thought you'd fight." I didn't whisper back. I smiled. Because she was right. And now? That's exactly why they were all losing. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. There was something eerie about walking past the marble columns while the building was still waking up. Like the walls hadn't decided yet who they'd favor today. But I didn't come alone. Vera, my iron-spined investigator, was already waiting at the bottom of the steps, coffee in one hand, manila envelope in the other. She leaned in. "You're not gonna like this. But you need to hear it." She handed me a copy of a legal document, marked confidential. The ink was fresh. A plea deal. Filed by Diana. I blinked. "Without Gary?" "She flipped on him," Vera said. "Went straight to the DA last night. Offered full cooperation in exchange for immunity from jail time. She's blaming everything on Gary and Margaret. Said she only followed orders. Claimed she was manipulated. That she forged nothing herself." I laughed. It was either that or scream. So that was the game now. She was casting herself as the little lamb. The innocent bride caught in a web spun by a predator ex-husband and a controlling mother. Never mind that she was the web. But here's the twist they never saw coming. I had a deal of my own. While Diana was busy backstabbing Gary, I had met with the DA the night before too. But I wasn't asking for favors. I was offering something. You see, after the news story went viral, a woman from Arizona reached out to me. She had once worked with Gary 10 years ago, at a marketing agency. Said she saw something odd in the headlines. Sent me photos. Emails. Signed documents. Turns out, Gary had forged signatures before. Not once. Not twice. But at least 5 times. Employees. Clients. Even his former boss. The DA's eyes lit up when I slid the file across the table. "You're handing us a serial forger," she said. "I'm handing you a pattern," I corrected. "And I want that pattern in court." She agreed. Which meant Diana's immunity. It wasn't bulletproof anymore. Not if she was an accessory to a pattern of organized fraud. So when court began and Diana sat smugly at the side of the room, thinking she'd earned herself a white flag, the DA stood up and said, "Your Honor, we have new evidence linking the defendants to a series of prior fraudulent acts across multiple states. We intend to prosecute under federal racketeering statutes." Diana's face went blank. Her lawyer stammered, "But she has a deal," the judge cut in. "Deals are conditional. And if your client failed to disclose her knowledge of broader criminal behavior, that deal may no longer stand." And just like that, her smug little immunity cracked like glass on marble. She turned toward me, eyes wide, mascara already betraying her composure. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. I reached into my bag and pulled out a printed wedding photo from their altar. The last photo before the police arrived. I handed it to the DA. Then turned to the court. "Your Honor, this was the moment before they said I do. But I didn't come here for revenge. I came here for truth. And if they're going to destroy my name, I'll make sure they're remembered by theirs." The jury looked stunned. The reporters in the gallery scribbled furiously. The court buzzed with murmurs. And Gary? His leg bounced under the table like a man who finally realized the gallows were being built with his own lies. They thought I was just some scorned ex-wife. They forgot I was also the legal owner. The woman they stole from. The sister they underestimated. And now? The witness who could bury them both. I thought I was ready. I had rehearsed my testimony 100 times. every date, every transaction, every moment I was lied to, cheated, erased. When the bailiff called my name and I walked toward the witness stand, I felt steady, confident. But the moment I placed my hand on that Bible, something inside me clenched like an old fist remembering a fight. I sat down, cleared my throat, and then I told them everything. I walked the jury through the forgery, the secret bank withdrawals, the fake LLC, the wedding day arrest, the hush money to Kendra Collins, the photo of Gary at the pregnancy clinic, Diana's secret plea deal, my mother's lies under oath. I spoke clearly, slowly. Not a single objection from the defense. Not a single interruption. Because the truth was too clean, too sharp. And just as the DA was about to say no further questions, I felt my phone buzz in my coat pocket, twice. 2 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Then a voicemail. I was going to ignore it, but something in my stomach said listen. So on my break, I walked to the empty hallway outside the courtroom and pressed play. Hello, this message is for Corinne Weller. This is Alan Beecham, attorney at law. I used to handle estate matters for your late father. I came across your recent court case through a friend in the DA's office, and I need to speak with you immediately. It concerns a document your mother may have hidden after your father passed. It's about the ownership of your house. Call me back. My ears started ringing. I played it again. Hidden document? Ownership of the house? I called him back from the courthouse bathroom, standing between 2 sinks as the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry flies overhead. He answered on the second ring. Ms. Weller, thank you for returning the call. I don't want to interfere with your case, but, back in 1998, your father drafted a secondary will. A quiet amendment. It placed full ownership of the family home solely in your name, separate from the joint estate. He intended for it to pass directly to you because, in his words, Margaret will give it to Diana otherwise. I nearly dropped the phone. You're telling me my father predicted this? Alan paused. Not in detail. But he knew your mother's intentions. He made me promise not to file the amendment unless someone tried to contest the property. But Margaret intercepted the original document after his funeral. Said it was no longer relevant and that the home would stay under the marriage trust. She refused to file the amendment. And you just let that go? She intimidated my partner at the time. Threatened reputation. It was a mistake. One I'm trying to make right. He offered to overnight a notarized copy, one he had secretly kept, locked away in his office files, just in case. When I hung up, I didn't feel rage. I felt grief. My father tried to protect me. And even after his death, she still found a way to smother his last act of love. Back in the courtroom, I handed the voicemail recording and the call log to the DA. She listened, her eyes widening by the second. This changes the foundation of the entire case, she whispered. The house was never Margaret's to influence. Your father's intention trumps everything. The DA requested an emergency hearing to submit the will amendment. And the judge? He granted it on the spot. Margaret, my mother, looked like someone had slapped her with an ice bucket. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but the judge silenced her. One more lie, Mrs. Weller, he warned, and I'll have you held in contempt. And Diana? She turned to her mother and said coldly, you promised me it was ours. But I didn't look at either of them. I looked at the sky outside the courtroom window. And whispered, thank you, Dad. You saw it coming, and you still tried. The thing about court cases is, they're not just about justice. They're about timing. And fate? Has a twisted sense of it. The morning after my father's will was introduced in court, I got a knock at my door. Not reporters. Not family. Not Vera. It was Kendra Collins. Yes, her. The woman Gary had paid off. The one they tried to erase. She looked nervous. More fragile than I remembered. And in her hand? A sealed white envelope. No address. No name on the outside. Just a red lipstick kiss stamped on the flap. "I was cleaning out my car," she said, eyes darting. "Found this wedged under the passenger seat. It's addressed to someone named E, but the handwriting is Diana's. I think you should read it." I took it with trembling fingers. She didn't stay. I sat at my kitchen table and peeled it open. The paper inside was crisp. Expensive. Like the kind you'd use to write a wedding vow. But the words on it? They were anything but romantic. "Dear E, if this works, I'll finally be free of Corinne's shadow. She doesn't even realize the house was never supposed to be hers. Mom agrees, we've waited long enough. Gary's on board, though I don't trust him. He's sloppy. But if you keep the money flowing, I'll make sure the deed is done before summer. The signature shouldn't be a problem. I've seen her write it enough. She always loops the R like a third grader. And if the notary gives us trouble, Mom will handle it, she still has pull at City Hall. After the wedding, we'll have the house, the trust, and the family name. And Corinne? She'll be too stunned to fight. She always is. We'll finally have everything she took. I'll see you soon. D. But what stopped my breath cold was the line above her name. A small scribbled note, like an afterthought, P.S. Tell Elias I miss him. Elias. Not Gary. I dropped the letter. Because that name? It wasn't just unfamiliar. It was my cousin. Elias Monroe. My late father's nephew. Once a financial advisor. Smart, charming, always floating around our family gatherings. But he had vanished years ago after a string of bad investments. Everyone said he'd moved out west to start fresh. And now he was suddenly Diana's co-conspirator? Lover? Financier? I called Vera immediately. Sent her a photo of the letter. Within hours, she dug up enough to send shivers down my spine. Elias had incorporated the LLC used to transfer stolen funds. He was the silent partner Gary and Diana funneled money through. And he had opened the offshore account where my stolen inheritance briefly vanished before being laundered back through Diana's hands. This wasn't a messy love triangle. It was a premeditated financial syndicate within my own bloodline. I turned the letter over, scanning it again, and saw one last detail scribbled faintly in the corner: use the cabin fund. It's clean. The cabin. The lake house my father left to me, the one they tried to remodel with funds they claimed were meant for the family. Suddenly, it all fit. They weren't just trying to sell my house. They were replacing me. Property. Money. Family name. Every piece of me, harvested and repackaged into their version of an empire. But now? I had the paper trail. I marched into the DA's office with that letter, the bank records, and Elias's LLC documentation. She looked up from her desk and said, "Corinne, I hope you're ready to testify again." I nodded. Gladly. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about legacy. And they were never going to write me out of it again. I knew they'd try something. After the letter. After the offshore account. After Diana's fake plea deal collapsed, and my mother had to answer to my father's hidden will. I knew the defense would get desperate. But I didn't expect him. Elias Monroe. He walked into that courtroom like he was arriving at a gala. Polished gray suit. Navy tie. That smug, signature half-smile he always wore at family barbecues when he told you how smart your investments could be, if you trusted him. He sat down at the witness stand like it was a throne, not a box built for truth. The defense attorney stood tall. "Your Honor, we call Mr. Elias Monroe, financial consultant and family member of the plaintiff, to testify on behalf of the defense. My jaw tightened. The DA leaned toward me and whispered, "They didn't notify us. He wasn't on the original list." Because of course he wasn't. This was an ambush. The defense started soft. "Mr. Monroe, can you describe your relationship with the Weller family?" He smiled. "Corinne is my cousin. Her father, my uncle, was like a second father to me growing up. We were close." Close? The last time I'd spoken to him was 7 years ago, when he tried to get me to invest in a solar marina startup that mysteriously vanished after my polite refusal. "And what can you tell us about her mental state during the time leading up to this case?" I felt my stomach twist. Elias sighed, perfectly rehearsed. "I mean this with compassion, but I believe Corinne was under significant stress. Her divorce, her isolation. She told me herself she was struggling. Said she couldn't sleep. That the house felt too big. That she was thinking of selling. She even asked me to help look into options." I clenched my fists under the table. That never happened. Never. "Would you say," the defense lawyer continued, "that it's possible Corinne gave verbal consent to sell the home and simply forgot?" "I wouldn't want to speculate," Elias replied smoothly. "But, yes. It's possible. Especially considering her emotional state." The courtroom murmured. The judge tapped the gavel once. "Order." The DA stood up, face calm but voice sharp as a blade. "Mr. Monroe, are you aware of a letter found by Ms. Collins? One in which Diana Weller, your alleged co-conspirator, names you as E and thanks you for keeping the money flowing?" Elias didn't flinch. "I've never seen that letter." "Do you deny opening the LLC tied to the offshore account?" "I set up many companies for clients. That doesn't prove wrongdoing." "And yet, your name appears on wire transfers linked to a stolen inheritance that was a business matter," Elias interrupted, still smiling. "Separate. Completely legal." Then she said it. "We have evidence you visited the lake cabin 2 weeks before the sale of Corinne's house, and that you signed a document on behalf of her mother to withdraw funds." He froze. Just for a second. Just enough. But he recovered. "That's inaccurate. I was simply helping with a family renovation. You forged Margaret Weller's signature, didn't you?" "I want a lawyer," he said, finally rattled. Gasps echoed. The judge nodded once. "Mr. Monroe, you are excused. And you are now under investigation for perjury and fraud." Elias stood up, hands shaking. Not so smug now. And as he walked past me, he glanced sideways and hissed, "You should have stayed quiet." I looked him in the eyes and said, "You should have remembered who raised me. My father taught me how to read contracts. But my mother? She taught me how to spot a liar." Elias was escorted out by security. The courtroom shifted again, this time in my favor. But inside, I wasn't celebrating. Because Elias's appearance wasn't just a final twist. It was a signal. They were falling apart. But they'd burn every bridge to take me with them. The message came through my lawyer. Not an email. Not a voicemail. Not even a handwritten note. Just a whispered phrase during a courtroom recess, "Diana wants to meet." Alone. At first, I laughed. Out loud. Sitting on the courthouse bench with my coffee halfway to my mouth. Meet? With me? After months of lies, forgeries, manipulation, betrayal, and now perjury charges circling her fiancé and our cousin like vultures? She wanted a chat. But I didn't dismiss it. Not right away. Because people only reach for conversation when they know the end is near. And Diana? She was running out of lifelines. So I agreed. On my terms. A public cafe 2 blocks from the courthouse. Security nearby. My investigator Vera sitting at the corner table, pretending to read a paperback. No privacy. No tricks. She showed up 10 minutes late, of course. Black sunglasses. Hair tied back. A scarf around her neck like she was auditioning for sympathy. She sat down slowly and said, "You look stronger." "I am." She nodded like it hurt. "I didn't come to fight." "Good. Because you'd lose." Her hands trembled a little as she pulled out a flash drive. Slid it across the table. Everything's on there. Emails. Voice memos. The night we planned the deed swap. Even Mom's part in the will cover-up. "You hand this to the DA. Gary and Elias won't just go to jail. They'll rot." I didn't touch it. Yet. "What do you want in return?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She leaned in, voice low and cold. "Drop the charges. I'll plead civil. No jail. Just restitution. Let me walk away. With some dignity. And I'll disappear. I swear." I stared at her. "You think dignity still lives in you?" I asked. "You lied to my face. Slept with my husband. Tried to take my house. Dragged our father's memory through the dirt. Turned our mother against me." "I didn't turn her," she whispered. "She was never really yours." That stopped me. Not because it surprised me, but because hearing it out loud still cut. I looked at the flash drive again. And finally, I reached out. Took it. Weighed it in my palm like a stone. Then I said, "Here's what's going to happen." Her eyes flickered with hope. "I'm going to give this to the DA. I'm going to watch Gary get sentenced. I'm going to make sure Elias is extradited if he tries to run. And you're going to go to jail. Maybe not for life. But long enough to remember the sister you tried to erase." She blinked rapidly. You don't have to." "Oh, but I do," I said. Calm. Clear. "Because if I let you walk now, you'll do it to someone else. Maybe not me. Maybe not family. But you'll ruin someone. Because that's who you are." She looked like she might cry. But I wasn't moved. I stood up. Tucked the flash drive into my coat pocket. "You had a choice," I said softly. "You could have had me as your sister. Your ally. You had me my whole life. Then I looked her dead in the eye. And you chose to make me your enemy." I walked away. Didn't look back. Vera fell in step with me on the sidewalk. "She offer anything useful?" she asked. I handed her the flash drive. "If what's on this is real," I said, "it won't just convict them. It'll bury them." I handed the flash drive over the very next morning. The DA plugged it in immediately. No ceremony. No hesitation. Just a laptop, 2 headphones, and a long silence as she scanned the folders. Dozens of files. Emails between Gary and Diana about timelines, signature angles, and how to handle Corinne if she panics. Spreadsheets showing cash withdrawals and fake company names. Photos of Elias in front of bank buildings, clearly time-stamped the day before offshore transfers. But there was a folder tucked all the way at the bottom. It was simply labeled, "Private, do not share." The DA glanced at me. "I'm opening it," she said. Inside were 4 voice memos. The first 3? Diana narrating her plans. Giddy. Calculating. Detailing how she'd lied to the notary, how she'd convince Mom I was slipping mentally, how Elias had secured the fake buyer for the property title flip. But the 4th file was only 11 seconds long. And the voice? Was my mother's. Not Diana. Not Gary. Not Elias. Margaret. And what she said made the hairs on my arms rise like ice through bone. "If you want the house, don't ask Corinne. She's too sentimental. Just sign for her. I'll handle any questions." I've been silencing her since she was 5. There was a pause. Then a soft, chilling chuckle. She's always been too easy to disappear. My stomach dropped. Not like a punch. Not like a scream. But like a lifetime folding in on itself. Because suddenly, it wasn't just the signature. It wasn't just the house. It was my whole childhood. That tight-lipped silence every time I tried to speak up. The dismissals. The undermining. The subtle erasures of my accomplishments. The way my sister was always golden, and I was overdramatic. She hadn't just betrayed me as an adult. She'd conditioned me for betrayal my entire life. The DA leaned back in her chair. "Do you want to add this to the prosecution?" she asked gently. I stared at the screen, the audio paused like a noose caught mid-swing. And I whispered, "Absolutely." Because that voice memo? That was the confession. The rot didn't start with Diana. It didn't end with Gary. It didn't even begin with Elias. It began with Margaret. The matriarch. The illusion of grace. The woman who sat at every Thanksgiving head of table, carving up more than turkey. And now? She was going to be carved up in court. The courtroom was packed. Not just with lawyers and jurors and family I hadn't spoken to in years, but with spectators. Neighbors. Strangers. Reporters who remembered the wedding arrest and wanted the sequel. But this wasn't a sequel. This was a reckoning. I took the stand for the second time. Swore in. Sat tall. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's daughter, someone's ex-wife, someone's quiet older sister. I felt like me. The prosecutor approached, her steps even. "Ms. Weller," she said gently, "we're aware you've already testified. But after reviewing new evidence, specifically, the fourth voice memo recovered from the flash drive, we'd like to revisit some family history. Is that okay with you?" I nodded. "Yes. Let's talk about your mother." The words hit like glass across concrete. Sharp. Sudden. "Margaret Lynn Weller," I said, steady. "My mother. Can you describe your relationship with her?" I took a breath. Not a deep one. Just enough to speak the truth clearly. My mother was the kind of woman who knew how to decorate grief. She never screamed. She never hit. But she could make a compliment feel like a correction. She believed silence was power, and she used it often. I spent most of my life being told I was too sensitive to remember things properly. "And did she support you during your marriage?" She supported the version of me that didn't challenge her. The one who smiled through Gary's affairs. The one who kept hosting family brunch even after Diana started dressing up for my husband. When I got divorced, she told me to take it with grace, and when I found out they forged my signature, she told me I must have forgotten signing it. "Did your mother have access to your father's second will?" "Yes." She intercepted it. She told the attorney not to file it, even though it gave me sole ownership of the house. She erased my father's final wish because it didn't serve hers. The room was silent. Not courtroom quiet, funeral quiet. And then the prosecutor asked the final question. "Ms. Weller, do you recognize this voice?" She played the clip. 11 seconds of venom dressed as maternal wisdom. "She's always been too easy to disappear." The jury flinched. I didn't blink. Because I wanted the moment to stain the walls of that courthouse forever. Then they called her. Margaret. My mother. She walked slowly to the stand, like the weight of her pearls might shatter her spine. Her lawyer tried to object. Tried to claim the audio was taken out of context. That it was edited. That it was private. But the judge overruled. "Mrs. Weller," the prosecutor began, "do you deny this is your voice?" My mother hesitated. Just long enough to feel like a verdict. "No," she said softly. That is me. And when you said Corinne was easy to disappear, what did you mean? She was never strong, she said, looking down. She let things happen to her. I didn't think she'd fight this hard. She never has. I stood up. Until now. The judge didn't stop me. No one did. I took one step closer to the stand and said, "You spent your whole life grooming me to be quiet. To doubt myself. And when I finally had something worth fighting for, something Dad wanted me to have, you tried to erase me again. But guess what, Mom?" I turned to the jury. To the cameras. To everyone who had ever called me dramatic. I didn't disappear. I documented. And now the whole world sees you for who you are. My mother looked away. Because she finally realized, the daughter she thought she buried, had become the one holding the shovel. It happened the day before sentencing. I was watering the garden, something simple, grounding, something that reminded me I still had roots no one could pull up, when Vera called. "You're not going to believe this," she said, out of breath. "Turn on Channel 8. Now." I did. And there she was. Margaret Weller. My mother. Sitting stiffly in a cream blazer and her favorite brooch, flanked by a smug estate lawyer who looked like he'd sold his soul for a glass of Pinot and a front-row seat to betrayal. The lower third on the screen read, "Exclusive, Weller matriarch changes will disown's daughter amidst courtroom chaos." She looked directly into the camera. "I want to make something clear," she began. "In light of recent events, and in defense of my personal legacy, I have amended my will. Corinne Weller is no longer a beneficiary of the Weller estate. She has turned private family matters into public spectacle. She has chosen vengeance over understanding, aggression over healing. I loved her as a daughter, but she no longer represents the values of this family." I dropped the watering can. The water spilled out like something holy had just been wasted on dirt. I stood there, drenched in roses and betrayal, watching the woman who gave birth to me try, again, to cut my name out of history. But what she didn't know. I already had a plan. You see, 2 weeks earlier, I had received a very different kind of document. One not written in bitterness or broadcast to local TV. It came from a courier. Delivered by hand. Signed and notarized in the corner with a name that made my breath catch. My father. It was a video will, recorded 6 months before his death. Hidden away with his estate attorney. Sealed unless Margaret Weller attempts to override his amended wishes. And override them, she had. I took that video directly to the DA. Then to the court. Then to the very same media outlet that had aired my mother's public crucifixion of me. And I gave them permission to broadcast it in full. 24 hours later, the real story aired. There he was, my father. Looking thinner than I remembered, but strong. Intentional. Proud. "If you're seeing this," he said, "it means my daughter Corinne is under attack. Let it be known that I trusted her. Loved her. Respected her more than anyone else in this family. She stood by me during my illness. She protected the home I built. And she has the strength to do what others only whisper about. To my daughter Diana, you were always charming, but I never trusted you. To my wife Margaret, if you are rewriting my wishes, you've already proven why I didn't share them with you. And to Corinne, if the wolves come for you, don't run. Look them in the eyes. You have the truth. And it's louder than blood." The video ended. And the broadcast? Went viral. People from all over the country sent me messages. Strangers said they cried. Women told me they had mothers just like mine. Daughters told me I gave them courage. And Margaret? Well, her lawyer resigned the next day. Her public support? Evaporated. She had tried to shame me in public. And I'd answered with our father's voice. She had a new will. But I had the last word. The day of sentencing arrived like thunder, no surprises, just a heaviness in the air that pressed down on your chest and whispered, "Today is the day you don't look away." The courtroom was packed again. Reporters lined the back. Strangers from town filled every pew. Even the clerk, who normally looked bored, was sitting a little straighter. At the front? Gary, Diana, Elias, Margaret. They sat like dolls arranged on a shelf, blank-faced, expressionless, waiting for their price tags to be ripped off and replaced with numbers measured in years behind bars. The judge looked over his glasses and said, "Before I issue sentencing, the court will now hear the official victim impact statement." He didn't have to ask who would be speaking. I stood. Walked slowly to the podium. My heels echoed like justice with rhythm. Then I looked at each one of them. I didn't need a script. I spoke from memory, the kind you can't forget even if you want to. Your Honor, for years, I was told I was too dramatic, too emotional, too forgiving. That I imagined slights, exaggerated pain, held grudges too long. But you don't imagine betrayal like this. You don't imagine waking up to find your home sold out from under you. Or that the man you once promised forever to is in bed with your own sister. You don't imagine your mother coaching them, rehearsing how to erase you from the very life you built. I glanced at Gary. You told me I was cold, Gary. But it turns out I was just tired of being burned. You didn't just cheat on me, you commodified me. Reduced me to a signature. You married me for my name, and when that wasn't enough, you tried to steal what came with it. I turned to Diana. You weren't just a sister. You were the shadow that followed me my entire life. And instead of becoming your own person, you took a shortcut through my marriage, my memories, my pain. But you never became me. You just became a thief in my skin. Then to Elias. You sold lies like investment strategies. But this wasn't business. It was blood. And you used ours like currency. You thought offshore accounts would hide your greed. But I traced every dollar like breadcrumbs back to your cowardice. Finally, I turned to Margaret. Mom. You used silence like a scalpel. Always carving me out of the narrative. I spent decades wondering what I did wrong. But now I know. I did the one thing you couldn't control. I survived you. The room was silent. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. Then I looked at the judge and said, I don't ask for revenge. I ask for truth. For the law to finish what they started. For them to finally sit with the consequences they thought would never touch them. The judge nodded. He cleared his throat. And then he spoke. The court finds the defendants guilty on multiple counts: fraud, forgery, identity theft, and conspiracy. Gary Weller, sentenced to 15 years with no possibility of parole for 7. Diana Weller, 8 years, with eligibility for early release based on cooperation and restitution. Elias Monroe, 12 years, federal custody, full financial audit and seizure of assets. Margaret Weller, given her role as instigator and her perjury under oath, this court sentences her to 5 years, suspended sentence, but orders mandatory psychiatric evaluation, asset forfeiture, and a lifetime ban from controlling any estate. The gavel hit. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I breathed. No applause. No dramatic exit. Just the sound of truth settling into the cracks they left behind. They were let out in cuffs. And I walked out free. But not just free from them. Free from who they made me believe I was. The silence in my house felt different after the trial. Not empty, just clean. No more secret meetings behind my back. No fake signatures. No hidden wires of betrayal coiled in the walls. Just me, my breath, and the familiar creak of floorboards that had finally been reclaimed as mine. But closure is a strange thing. It doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it waits in the dust. Or in my case, the attic. It was a week after sentencing. I was up there searching for my father's old Navy box, the one with his medals and cufflinks, when I found something else instead. A plain brown envelope, tucked behind a rafter beam. Sealed. My name scrawled across the front in my father's handwriting, soft and crooked from age. I stood frozen, fingers brushing over the ink like it might vanish if I blinked. And then I opened it. Inside was a folded letter. A real one. Paper and pen. The edges slightly yellowed. I sat down on the attic floor. And I read. My dearest Corinne, if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong, and I wasn't able to stop it. I want you to know, first and above all, I saw you. Always. Even when others tried not to. Even when your mother whispered that you were too soft, too naive, too emotional. I saw your strength. And I knew it would one day be tested. I didn't know how. Or when. But I feared it would involve the house. Margaret was always focused on legacy, not in the way you are, but in the way some people collect things instead of memories. I knew she wanted the house to go to Diana. She hinted it more than once. But it wasn't hers to give. Not spiritually. Not legally. That home became yours the day you stayed up all night to repaint the front door after I dropped the ladder. The day you mowed the lawn even after your mother scolded you for getting dirty. The way you loved it, not just owned it. I left you more than property. I left you roots. If they try to take it, if Margaret, Diana, or anyone else ever tries to erase you from what is rightfully yours, I want you to fight. And I want you to know I will be with you. Not in spirit. Not in memory. But in every corner of that house. In the way the light hits the porch in October. In the smell of coffee on the windowsill. In the floorboard that creaks by the stairs because you refuse to let me fix it. You are not too emotional. You are the last good thing I ever built. And if you're still standing, then they didn't win. All my love, Dad, I didn't realize I was crying until the tear hit the last word and smudged the ink. I stayed there a while. Not broken. Not grieving. Just full. Full of something no sentencing could give me. Peace. Because revenge is loud. Justice is final. But truth? Truth is quiet. It waits. And when it finally arrives, it feels like a father's hand, resting on your shoulder from somewhere just beyond the walls. It had been 3 weeks since the sentencing. The house was finally quiet in the right ways. No whispers behind closed doors. No lawyer calls. No reporters trying to catch me at the mailbox. Just me, the ticking of the old kitchen clock, and the sound of wind brushing through the hydrangeas outside. I had begun to reclaim my life, not with grand gestures, but with small ones. Painting the window trim. Replanting the rosemary bush. Sleeping through the night. And then came the knock. 3 sharp raps. Not urgent, but steady. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Kendra Collins. She looked different. Not nervous, not cornered like before. She was holding a toddler, maybe 2 years old, with soft brown curls and eyes that pulled the breath from my chest. Eyes I'd seen before. Gary's eyes. My God, I whispered. Is he? She nodded, tightening her arms around the child. Yes. His name is Elijah. And he's Gary's son. I leaned against the doorframe. Not because I was shocked, but because something deeper than that hit me. Not betrayal. Not anger. Compassion. Kendra continued softly. I wasn't going to tell you. I didn't want to put more weight on you after everything. But after the trial, after what you did, I knew I couldn't keep hiding. Why now? I asked. Because you protected me, she said. You could have left me out to dry. Blamed me for taking hush money. But instead, you let me be a witness. You gave me my name back. And this little boy? She looked down, smiling. He deserves to know who saved his mother. I crouched down to meet Elijah's gaze. He blinked at me. Curious. Innocent. Unaware of the storm that had raged before him. He looks like him, I murmured. Yes, Kendra said. But he's not him. And then she pulled something from her bag. A sealed envelope. I know you have no reason to take this. But I want you to. It's a copy of his birth certificate. I've added your name as emergency guardian. Just in case something happens to me. I looked up. Kendra, I'm not asking you to raise him, she said. I'm asking you to be a lighthouse. In case things get dark. In case he ever asks who helped his mother when no one else would. She placed the envelope in my hand. I don't want to erase him from Gary's history, she said. But I do want to rewrite the way it ends. I nodded, speechless. And then Elijah reached a tiny hand toward me. Placed it on my wrist. And I knew. This story wasn't about what they stole. It was about what I still had the power to protect. It arrived folded in half, no envelope, sealed with tape like the prison system didn't want to waste glue on a liar. A letter. From Diana. The handwriting was unmistakable. Neat. Curled on the edges. Still trying to look elegant, even behind bars. I stared at it for a full hour before opening it. I made tea. I cleaned the stove. I stared at Elijah's toy car on the kitchen rug, left behind after Kendra's last visit. And then I sat at the table, same one where I signed divorce papers, reviewed court filings, held my father's hidden will, and read the words of the sister who nearly ruined me. Corinne, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I wouldn't blame you if you tore this up unread. But I also know you. You'll read it. Because even when we were little, you always gave people more chances than they deserved. I've spent the last few weeks in prison therapy. Not the kind that changes your life. The kind that makes you realize you never had one of your own. You think I hated you? I didn't. I wanted to be you. That house. That marriage. That sense of belonging. You wore it like skin. And I could never figure out how you did it. So I tried to take it. And now, I sit in a 6x8 cell with nothing to my name but bad choices and fluorescent lights that never turn off. But there's something you need to know. About Gary. Something I kept from you even during the trial. Gary didn't just forge your name. He was preparing to do something worse. The day before the wedding, he had a second deed drawn up, one that wouldn't just transfer the house to us, but would place you in debt. He was planning to take out a reverse mortgage against the house using forged documents that showed you as co-signer and mentally unfit. He even met with a notary in secret. Said you had declining capacity. And guess who was going to sign off as witness? Mom. She said, and I quote, Corinne's not going to need that house when she's locked up. I didn't stop them. I didn't have the spine. But when I saw you in court, the way you stood there, calm and clear, I realized you were never weak. You were just alone. I'm not asking for a second chance. I've used all of mine. I'm just telling you the truth so you don't have to wonder what else they had planned. And because maybe, just maybe, Elijah will grow up knowing that his father wasn't a villain, he was a warning. Do what I couldn't. Live. Diana, I folded the letter slowly. Didn't cry. Didn't burn it. I just walked it upstairs and placed it in a box with the rest, my father's letter, the forged deeds, the voice recordings. A time capsule of betrayal. And of proof. But it wasn't the ending. It was the reason. Because now I knew the full truth. And now? I could move forward without a shadow at my heels. Because what they planned to bury me with became the foundation I was rebuilding on. I spent months fixing the damage they left behind. Not just legal. Not just financial. Reputational. Because when your own family tries to erase you, the real scar is in the way your neighbors lower their voices when you walk by. The way invitations stop. The way people say, "Poor Corinne," like you're already buried. So I decided to invite them all back. Every last one. Neighbors. Former friends. Colleagues. Even the town council president who once asked me quietly if I needed residential assistance. I hosted a gathering. Not a party. Not a celebration. A reckoning. The invitations were simple. White cardstock. Embossed in gold, "The truth lives here now." Corinne Weller. The afternoon of the event, I opened every window in the house. I laid out lemonade and shortbread cookies and placed my father's old journals on the entry table. Framed a photo of him on the mantel. Then I waited. And they came. Some out of curiosity. Some out of guilt. Some, maybe, out of apology. I didn't give a speech from the porch. I led them, one by one, into the living room. The TV screen was already cued. A short documentary. Titled, "Inheritance, What They Tried to Steal." Footage of the courtroom. Excerpts from the trial. Voice clips. The letter from Diana. The flash drive files. My father's video will. Intercut with photos of me. Of the house. Of the documents they tried to bury. At the end, my voice. You may know me as the woman whose husband married her sister. But that's not my story. My story is that I lived. I stayed. I fought. And I rebuilt the very life they tried to take. When the lights came back up, the room was silent. Until someone began to clap. Then another. And another. It wasn't standing ovation applause. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft. But it was real. Afterward, people came up to me. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I had no idea. You're stronger than all of them put together." But the one that stayed with me most? A woman I barely knew. Widow. Quiet. Wore her grief in her posture. She whispered, "Your story gave me the courage to leave my son's house. He and his wife, they weren't kind." I nodded. Took her hand. And for the first time in a long time, I felt useful. Not just a survivor. A voice. Because what they tried to erase became a blueprint for women like her. And the house? It didn't just belong to me now. It belonged to every woman who'd ever been told she was too emotional. Too dramatic. Too weak. No. We are not too anything. We are exactly enough. But before I say anything else, I want to speak directly to you, the one who's been listening. Watching. Maybe crying. Maybe clenching your fists because you recognize some piece of this story in your own. Thank you. Thank you for walking this road with me. If this story touched something in you, subscribe my channel. Like, share, and comment below, and tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Because stories like this don't belong in silence anymore. Now, let me tell you how it ends. It's spring now. The garden's blooming again. The hydrangeas I thought I'd lost during the worst season of my life have come back stronger, thicker, with more color than I ever remember. Funny how nature mirrors survival, isn't it? Diana is still in prison. I hear she started teaching GED classes to the younger girls. That part made me pause. Maybe redemption isn't for everyone, but relevance can still find us in strange ways. Gary? Serving 15 years. No parole. His appeals were denied after the full financial pattern came to light. Last I heard, he was trying to run a prison book club. Irony is wild. Elias vanished from the headlines. But he didn't vanish from justice. His assets were frozen. His name? Now synonymous with theft. And my mother? Margaret lives alone in an assisted facility just outside of town. No one visits. The woman who once held power like a rosary now asks the nurses to bring her boxes of old family photos. But she's missing from most of them now. And me? I'm still here. I kept the house. Not for nostalgia. But because every wall is a reminder that I won. That I rebuilt with evidence instead of rage. That I survived the very people who built me to break. Kendra still visits sometimes. Elijah is 3 now. He calls me Miss Corinne, but every time he runs up the steps, I feel something softer than anger settle in my chest. Like forgiveness. But not for them, but for me. Sometimes I still hear my father's voice. Not in ghosts. In goodness. In the sound of a neighbor's wind chime. In the smell of coffee on quiet mornings. In the mirror, when I look at a woman who doesn't flinch anymore. Because I am not a victim. I'm evidence. Proof that you can lose your husband. Your sister. Your inheritance. Your history. And still win. Because the moment you choose truth over fear, dignity over silence, and yourself over their comfort, you become unstoppable. The end. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it. And tell me in the comments, what part of Corinne's journey hit you the hardest? Don't forget to like, subscribe my channel, and say hello in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from?